I wanted to, talk a little bit about the situation of Wikipedia as a dominant, or maybe in some ways the dominant, public forum for facts today. If you think about how people are getting information today, I always think it's sort of fun. I get a lot of questions when I'm talking to reporters, and people like to use the term mainstream media. But if you take a look at the online world, and you take a look at CNN, BBC, New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, Wikipedia has more traffic than all of those combined. And so in a certain sense, we are the mainstream media now, which is a pretty big change that's happened pretty quickly. And we are really very, very global. And I think it's interesting to talk about some of the experiences that people are having globally, because the situation of public dialogue and public discourse in the English-speaking world is very familiar to everyone. But what's really interesting to me is some of the things that are going on all around the world. So, for example, we know about the recent election troubles in Iran, and I was very curious to find, what was going on in Farsi Wikipedia, which is at fa.wikipedia.org, if you want to put it up there. What was going on in the Farsi language Wikipedia around the Iranian elections? Because a lot of things were going on online as people were on Twitter and so forth, and so I had someone who is fluent, native level fluent in both Farsi and English, translate the entry from the Farsi Wikipedia for me. Now, of course, translation is very difficult to get the nuances and so forth, but what I was really curious about is, would the article satisfy me with respect to our standards of neutrality? We used to have a lot of concern that in some places around the world, what if the local Wikipedia gets taken over by extremists? Of course, the most common type of extremist who might take over a Wikipedia like this would be people like me, because our community tends to be, sort of the tech geek, cyber utopian, libertarian-ish types, and that's true all around the world. So I was curious to know, what was going on there. So the translation, it turned out that I was pretty much super happy with it. It was exactly what you would hope for from a good Wikipedia entry. Now, it was smaller, shorter than the English version, but it basically just gave the facts. There's been an election, the following results were announced, the opposition has disputed the results, there's been some unrest, these things happen, those things happen. It was basically just the facts that you would hope that a person who is there in Iran, and they realize there's something going on, and they don't trust the media because it's under the government control. They just want to get the basic information of what's going on without a lot of opinion. That's good. This is not Arabic. It's Farsi. Persian. Persian is the same as Farsi. It's Persian. Now this will be really interesting. See what Google thinks. Yes, so that's one example of something that's going on that I was really pleased to see. And we're generally available in Iran. They do have some filtering of the internet. Another place, I was in China about 2 years ago, and this is when we were still banned in China, and I went and I visited high school students there. And I asked them, I was curious to know, what websites do they like? What's your favorite website? YouTube. They like funny cat videos, just like high school students everywhere. They like YouTube. I said, do you ever use Wikipedia? Have you heard of Wikipedia? Nothing. Never heard of it. Knew nothing about it whatsoever. And by the way, even though we've been accessible in China now for about a year and a half, I was just in Beijing, and I went with a tour guide, an English-speaking tour guide, giving me a tour. And usually when I'm in, tour guides love Wikipedia because they crib all their notes from it. But I asked him about Wikipedia. He had never heard of it, even now. Speaking of this Chinese high school student, I on my phone, which if you have a cell phone that goes out to another network, it's not censored inside China because it's like a virtual private network out. So I called up the very famous photo of Tiananmen Square and the guy in front of the tank, and showed the photo to the students, and they had never heard of this or seen this. They knew nothing about this photo. Well, that's sort of interesting that the censorship in China is working very well, but nonetheless, we're now accessible in China, although certain pages like Tiananmen Square are filtered. But information is coming out, and then people have reported to me that in the Chinese Wikipedia on certain difficult topics, that the Wikipedia entry is pretty much what you would hope it would be. It's very neutral, just sort of explains things in that typical Wikipedia way. And then finally, one last example is I was in Lithuania and I was visiting with the president of parliament. He's not the president of the country, he's like the head of parliament, but he's not quite prime minister. I didn't quite understand his job, but anyway, he's an older guy, and he's like the last guy still left in parliament in Lithuania who was there when the Soviets left. And he was one of the people who, they were holed up in the building for several days with the Soviet military. Only one shot was fired. They still have a bullet hole in the glass on the building that they preserved. And then the Russians just, they didn't feel like fighting, so they just went home. So they were very lucky. They didn't have to fight. The Russians just decided to leave. And so he's a very scholarly guy, and he can read Lithuanian, Polish, German, and English. And he's on the board of some kind of Lithuanian, very old-fashioned Lithuanian encyclopedia project. So he's really interested in our work. And so he had printed out the Wikipedia entry about a famous battle that happened 100 and something years ago between the Lithuanians and the Poles. And he said the Lithuanian version tells the Lithuanian side of the story, and the Polish version tells the Polish side of the story. The German, he said it was very short. The Germans didn't really have much about it, and we probably can't conclude much from that. It's just something they didn't have much. But he said it was really interesting. The English version was fabulous. He said it told both sides of the story and why there is still an active and legitimate historical conflict about what really happened at this battle. And he said it seemed like this was a place where the Polish people and the Lithuanians had met, to sort of hash out the differences. And in fact, we looked into it a little bit, and that's more or less what had happened. Some of the editors there had met and sort of figured out a compromised version. And then over time, the last time I checked, somebody said, yeah, actually both, because I talk about it a lot, but that the Polish and the Lithuanian versions have gotten better over time. That they've reincorporated to say, maybe they're not quite balanced yet, but they at least acknowledge that, there is a historical controversy about what happened. So this is the kind of healthy dialogue that I'm seeing at Wikipedia, which I'm very excited about. And she's giving me time up. The interesting thing is that I travel all over the world, and although in different places it isn't necessarily mostly white, mostly middle-class people, that's because if you're in India, that's not who you find. But it's still, if you think about the social class of people all around the world, it's going to be basically this same audience that we have here today. It's upper middle class, educated people, which isn't necessarily a bad group of people to be writing the history of the world, but it is an interesting point.
Thank you very much.